Welcome, it is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as we try to build this thing up. I don't know when I'm going to publish this, so I'm just thinking aloud quickly. If I put this out on Tuesday, no, I'm not wearing the same outfit 2 days in a row. I'm just recording two separate videos back to back because I wanted to split up the Rashawn Gary trade to the Dallas Cowboys with what Brian Gutekunst is doing with the offensive line, and that's going to be the meat and potatoes of this video. It appears that Goody and the Packers are taking the approach with the offensive line where it's not going to be a complete overhaul. There's going to be some familiar faces gone, right? Like by the time you watch this video, or maybe why I'm recording it, Rasheed Walker might come to a deal with a team because Rasheed Walker is not going to be back with the Green Bay Packers. Jordan Morgan's going to be your left tackle in 2026. Elgton Jenkins, who's been a mainstay on the offensive line for so many years now, a cap casualty on Monday for Green Bay. And so some familiar faces are out the door, but I believe at the crux of it, the goal for Goody is to let this group that they envisioned for 2026 play it out that way and see if they can kind of come together as a cohesive group, find some rhythm, because the offensive line, which for decades in Green Bay has been a position they always, if anything, overinvest in. They don't let the offensive line become a problem too late. They always address it. Free agency, the draft, trades, whatever it takes. Green Bay is always investing heavily in the offensive line. Yet last year at, different junctures throughout the season and for some stretches of the year, the offensive line was not up to par with what the standard is in Green Bay. Now, injuries played a part. Zach Tom in and out of the lineup. Elgton Jenkins, a season-ending injury. Aaron Banks was at the back in training camp, and then other injuries throughout the season, but really came on towards the end of the year. And so you had names and bodies and players, funneling in and out of the lineup. But at its core, this could have been a complete overhaul. You could have said, Elgton Jenkins was a cap casualty, and that probably would have stayed the same. Rasheed Walker going somewhere else. But Green Bay also could have said Sean Rhyan, who I think most viewed as 50-50. Is Sean Rhyan going to be back or not for the Packers, 2026 and beyond? And really throughout his first few years in Green Bay, kind of a weird set of circumstances with Sean Rhyan because it felt like he was constantly going back and forth between being in the good graces with the Packers and the staff and then all of a sudden falling out of favor and he's benched. Was it against Cincinnati or Arizona this year for Jordan Morgan? And the Jordan Morgan experience at right guard was not great. Far better at right tackle now. He'll be your left tackle in 2026 and beyond. That's the hope for Green Bay. And there was a point in time where Sean Rhyan, I think it was the game against Arizona, didn't play any snaps at right guard, just played special team snaps. And a few days after that game against the Cardinals, this past October, I think it was, October, November, somewhere around there, he had said directly, going with the plan and what the team wants to do, but he said, I'm probably not going to be here past this season. And now he inks this 3-year, $33 million deal. And I believe Goody's idea is cross your fingers, hope for health, and see if left to right, Jordan Morgan at left tackle, Aaron Banks, because they restructured Aaron Banks' contract. Because a complete overhaul would have been Rasheed Walker's gone, Elton's a cap casualty, Sean Rhyan signed somewhere else, and you also take Aaron Banks off the books and just view it as a deal gone wrong 1 year into it, right? But instead, they restructure Aaron Banks. He'll be your left guard. They give Sean Rhyan this 3-year contract, over $30 million, that they can get out of after 1 year. Green Bay can get out of this thing after 1 year if it doesn't work out with Sean Rhyan, because I know a lot of people were up in arms about the annual value for Sean Rhyan. We'll get to that in a second. And then I'd have to imagine the plan is to have Anthony Belton at right guard and Zach Tom at right tackle. And Darian Kennard signed a 1-year deal with Green Bay on Monday as well. I think that's a sneaky deal to not ignore because while we believe we know what the starting 5 will be on that offensive line now that Elgton Jenkins is gone, Rasheed Walker will sign elsewhere, and Sean Rhyan is back along with Aaron Banks, because you're not restructuring Aaron Banks' contract to then release him. You're restructuring it because you're keeping him around, at least for this upcoming season. And while we now have a clear picture of what Green Bay's thinking for its starting 5 on that offensive line, there are still depth concerns. And so to bring back a player like Kennard, I don't think can just get overlooked. He was a good depth piece for Green Bay last season. For the Sean Rhyan part of this, it made the most sense. You can talk about frustration with the contract, the annual value, because I believe there were outlets like was it Sport Track and others thought Sean Rhyan might get around six. I'm not going to say it. I was going to say 6-7. Around, let's just say 6.5 to 8 million. Like Sean Rhyan was going to be somewhere around there, and then Green Bay comes in over the top with 3 years, $33 million. They got it done before Sean Rhyan ever hit free agency. Green Bay knew whether it was going to be via release or trade, Elgton Jenkins wasn't going to return. That seemed like a foregone conclusion heading into this offseason, that Elgton Jenkins would be a cap casualty for the Packers. So then you fall back on, okay, well, Elgton Jenkins was our starting center. Sean Rhyan filled in more than admirably for Elgton Jenkins. He was good. He was a good center, and you hope that with a full offseason under his belt this summer, that Sean Rhyan becomes more accommodated, more comfortable as the center, and that maybe there's more layers to his game playing in the middle of the offensive line so that he can progress and get better and better. And maybe last year wasn't the finished product of Sean Rhyan as your center. Maybe there's still a little bit of development and progression from that aspect for Sean Rhyan playing the position. But Green Bay had to know what they were doing with Elgton Jenkins before free agency started. If Sean Rhyan would have started or signed elsewhere, you're all of a sudden looking at a situation where it's like, what are we doing at center? Are we doing Jacob Bunk? And I know a lot of people are like, Tyler Linderbaum. And he was the prized free agent offensive lineman. My concern and my worry was there's a lot of teams. This was not an offseason where 1, 2, maybe 3 teams need a center. This is an offseason still, present tense, where there are quite a few teams in the market for a center and not a lot of centers hitting the market. Tyler Linderbaum was the cream of the crop. And so you are rolling the dice if you're the Green Bay Packers, and your thought process could have been this offseason, and some people would have wanted them to go about it this way. Let's try to get in the running for Tyler Linderbaum and empty out the treasure chest, whatever financial resources it takes to land Linderbaum. The problem with that is you could have a team like the Raiders come over the top and give Linderbaum a 3-year, $81 million deal like they did on Monday, $60 million guaranteed, makes him the highest paid interior offensive lineman in NFL history. And Green Bay just, with some of the contracts they have, Jordan Love, Micah Parsons particularly, Green Bay's not, they're not getting to that point with Tyler Linderbaum. They're not able to match that or exceed what a team like the Raiders offered Linderbaum and got him to agree to on Monday. And so then if you're Green Bay, it's like, all right, well, we went big game hunting. We didn't get Linderbaum. Fallback option is Sean Rhyan. Well, if you let this play out into free agency, like they would have had to if they wanted to try to get Linderbaum, Sean Rhyan could have said, screw this, I'm signing somewhere else. So to me, the timing made all the sense in the world to get a deal done with Sean Rhyan, and maybe Green Bay bit off a bigger bite of the apple financially than what some people wanted to see in a deal for Sean Rhyan. But to me, this made the most sense to get this done now. It checks off a box. You know who your center is. There's familiarity. It's not a new face. Like if you bring in a new face, a new name to be your center or a starting offensive lineman like Green Bay did last year with Aaron Banks at left guard and Anthony Belton, who filled in at right guard as a rookie, second-round pick towards the end of the year. It doesn't mean that's like a disastrous plan, but I do think there's something to be said for having that familiarity and trusting that Sean Rhyan and Jordan Love already have started that rapport and that chemistry working with one another, center, quarterback, and that sort of relationship. There was a lot of risk in banking in on getting Tyler Linderbaum and then saying, well, if we don't, we can pivot to Sean Rhyan, but free agency is already underway, and maybe someone else bowed out of the Linderbaum sweepstakes earlier that also needed a center and said, let's put max effort resources into bringing over Sean Rhyan. So I like that Green Bay was really proactive instead of reactive in shoring up that center spot, because who's your center if Elgton Jenkins is a cap casualty like he was and you swing and miss at Linderbaum and Sean Rhyan decides to sign somewhere else? Then you're looking at the draft, you're looking at a potential trade. Some will say what Green Bay did with Sean Rhyan was the safest route, and if that's your prerogative on it, okay. I also think it was the right route for the Packers to take. And I'm not talking about for the offensive line as a whole. I'm talking about for the center position. Couldn't really bring Elgton Jenkins back coming off that injury, and really how he looked even when he was healthy at center. It didn't seem like a great fit as Green Bay had envisioned. I will wonder for years why they pivoted Elgton Jenkins, who was an all-pro level left guard, away from left guard to center and brought in Aaron Banks. Like, if you're not going to bring back Josh Myers last off season, and I don't want to get way off the rails here, but it does tie in with Elgton Jenkins and his release from the Packers on Monday. If you're not going to bring back Josh Myers at center, why not just bring in a center? I know Elgton Jenkins can play center, but you had such a good thing with him at left guard. To try to tinker with that by moving him and then bringing in Aaron Banks, it just seemed like the Packers could have taken a different route. And I know hindsight's 20/20, but I believe there were a lot of people, myself included, that when they signed Aaron Banks, it was like, okay, well, Elgton Jenkins is going to move to center because Aaron Banks has only ever played left guard in his career in the NFL with San Francisco because that was his first pit stop in the NFL before coming to Green Bay. Whereas Green Bay typically likes versatility with their offensive linemen. They like someone like Sean Rhyan who can play right guard, can play center. Hell, if you needed him to play tackle, he'd kick it to the outside and play tackle too. Elgton Jenkins can play anywhere. Anthony Belton can be a guard, can be a tackle. They've tried that experience with Jordan Morgan. When they signed Aaron Banks, it was like, he is your left guard, and it just felt like they were moving pieces on the chessboard that didn't really need. They moved one too many pieces. Elgton Jenkins could have stayed at left guard. You could have got a center. But now you fast forward to this offseason, and it didn't really work out at center with Elgton Jenkins even when he was healthy. It worked out, I would say, probably better with Sean Rhyan, and I'm not saying Sean Ryan's a better player, a better offensive lineman than Elgton Jenkins. I don't know how we can make that a fair comparison and try to quantify it in any respect, but I would say Sean Rhyan as a center looked better than Elgton Jenkins did as a center last year, and so Green Bay opts to go to that well and to bring Sean Rhyan back on a 3-year deal. And you can, be upset and talk about the money and, they overpaid and blah, blah. They checked a box off, and they did it before all the chaos started because the guarantee Green Bay got was, we've got this deal in place with Sean Rhyan, and now we don't have to worry about that in free agency. To me, it was too big of a gamble, too big of a risk to expect to win the Tyler Linderbaum sweepstakes, and if you didn't, to then fall back on re-signing or giving a contract to Sean Rhyan in the hopes that he would just wait for you. He would wait for the Packers. There was no guarantee of that. So I'm all for it. And what is he? He's entering the prime of his career. He's 25 years old. Sean Ryan's 25 years old. And from Green Bay's perspective, if I read this correctly, I got to find this. Yeah, there's team options for $9 million in 2027 and $10 million in 2028. Has a cap hit of a little over $6.5 million this year because there was a sizable bonus to the deal. So I'm fine with it. If it doesn't work out, am I sitting here going nuts? Oh my gosh, they brought Sean Rhyan back. Thank God they have to have Sean Rhyan back. No, but I think he was a good center. He was, I would say, better than average at times, and you hope that as he gets more reps at that position, and again, a full offseason he's one guy, along with Jordan Morgan. I would say those two. I would not, if you want to still flirt with, hey, can Anthony Belton try to be a guard and a tackle and maybe give him reps here and there? I don't know how that would work because Zach Tom is your right tackle, and I think Jordan Morgan is your left tackle. But I know Green Bay loves versatility on the offensive line. I would let Sean Rhyan solely focus on being the center for the Green Bay Packers. Don't even give him reps at guard or at tackle in training camp or the preseason. Let him focus on being the center. And that's what I hope they do with Jordan Morgan too. Let him focus on being the left tackle for the Green Bay Packers. The versatility is great, and the ability for these guys to wear multiple hats benefits them in a major way because you can move them around, right? And we've seen Green Bay do that, and we know how much they value that versatility, especially with the offensive line. In this particular case, you're giving Sean Rhyan a 3-year deal. Again, they can get out of it after 1 year. I hope the plan is let's let him become the best version he can be as the center for the Packers and not worry about playing another position. That would be my hope that the Packers, is that going to be the blueprint? Who knows? But I was satisfied with the deal. And again, the total number of over $30 million it didn't jump off the page where it was like, holy crap, Green Bay's breaking the bank for Sean Rhyan. It was just more than what was expected, but it wasn't like outlandishly more than what some of these markets had predicted Sean Rhyan would net in free agency. So I'm good with it. I think banking in on snagging Linderbaum in free agency would have been a huge risk. Bringing back Sean Rhyan, it's not going to send, waves throughout the league, but Sean Rhyan proved to be a good center that has a chance to get better and better at the position as he gets more reps. The Packers, to me, went the path that made the most sense, and timing was a lot of that. They didn't even let it get to free agency. They didn't take that risk. They didn't take that chance. And in this case, I think it was smart to not roll the dice and just bring back Sean Rhyan before, all hell breaks loose in free agency. And now if you're Green Bay, you can check off one box. You have Sean Rhyan. We know Aaron Banks is going to be back because they're restructuring his deal. Jordan Morgan's going to be your left tackle. Anthony Belton probably your right guard. And Zach Tom your right tackle. I say probably for Belton because, he primarily played tackle at North Carolina State, but you would assume right tackle is Zach Tom, but you would assume the Packers are just handing the reins over to Jordan Morgan at left tackle. Maybe there's a competition. I thought Belton was okay at guard, and again, probably not a spot he thought he'd be in his rookie season, playing right guard when he featured as a left tackle in college. So maybe there's, we're certain Sean Rhyan's going to be the center. We're certain Zach Tom's going to be the right tackle. We're certain Aaron Banks is going to be the left guard. And we're pretty certain Jordan Morgan's your left tackle. I would say, there's a level of certainty that Belton will be your right guard, but maybe a little sliver of doubt that something else creeps up and then Belton just becomes a depth piece in his second year. But we'll see. But they bring Sean Rhyan back. Elgton Jenkins is a cap casualty. Aaron Banks is restructured. Again, by the time you watch this, maybe Rasheed Walker is signed. I'm going to check just in case. But maybe Rasheed Walker is signed somewhere else. But the offensive line, the picture is becoming more and more clear. Nakobe Dean, 3-year deal with the Raiders. I know he was a player that the Packers fans were interested in before the Zaire Franklin trade. But I think Gannon would have been the DC in Philly when Nakobe Dean was there for his first couple of seasons. I believe that's correct. Maybe there was a year or two of overlap. Either way, Green Bay has answers in place for the offensive line. I think now you have to pivot towards the draft, and you bring Kennard back on a 1-year deal to find more depth. This offensive line needs more depth. And that a lot of that depends on your belief in some of the, what is your belief in a Travis Glover? What is your belief in a Jacob Monk? A lot of these offensive linemen, John Williams is still in the building, and I know he was injured most of last year as a rookie. He was a 7th-round pick, right? Yeah, he was a 7th-round pick. And so you have to ask, what is your belief in some of these offensive linemen? But I do think Green Bay needs to add depth. I was fine with the Sean Rhyan deal. Glad it got sorted out before free agency, before the chaos began. Because if we're going to call a spade, we'll end with this. Green Bay was not going to win the Tyler Linderbaum sweepstakes. And it sucks to have to come to that reality because he obviously would have been a great player to have in the building as your center, right? As the brains of the operation for the offensive line. You're banking in on Sean Rhyan progressing, developing, and that last year wasn't. What did he play? 6-7 games at center? Yeah, that was it. And outside of that, he's played guard and a little bit of tackle for the Packers. So you're hoping that more reps will turn into better and more consistent productive play from Sean Rhyan, but it was already good. It was a fine product last year for him. Let me know what you guys and gals think. I'm always appreciative of all the support. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. We'll see you next time.